to take in their first, second, or third years, in their first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth semesters, as the case may be. What is it that we have in general English? You can see that I have divided into two. On the left, you have what are called textual questions. My dear students, all of you, whichever semester you are in, whichever university you may be studying in, you do have a textbook. You are expected to read the textbook. The textbook is taught in class. Most of our textbooks have questions at the end. What kind of questions could be asked from the text? Remember, since I'm talking to students of all the semesters, I'm not taking one textbook as an example. Since I'm talking to students of all the universities in the state of Gujarat, I'm not talking about one lesson, one chapter. I'm talking about textual questions in general. So, what kind of questions can we have? We can have, number one, answers in brief. And generally, when the question paper says answer in brief, we mean probably a sentence or two or three sentences, not an entire paragraph. So these could be questions like why did he, how did he, when did he? You could have questions like that. Remember, my dear students, for all short answers, it would be a good idea to begin your answer with some words from the question. This way, you've got some of your words right, you've got the spellings right, but do remember that in the English language, the question form is very different from the statement form. Right? Remember, you've done types of sentences, so you know what I'm talking about. An interrogative sentence is always very different from a statement. So, if the question is something like, why did Tom go to school that day? I'm just making up the question because I'm not talking of any particular text. Tom went to school. Why did Tom go? Remember the sentence structure there of the question. The did indicates to you that we are talking about the past. And therefore, your answer will not say, Tom go, Tom goes. Your answer would begin with, Tom went to school or Tom did not go to school, as the case may be. Since I'm not talking about a particular text, I'm only warning you, I'm only reminding you that answer, statement form will be different from the question form. A little attention to tense would be absolutely essential here. The second kind of question, my dear students, that you have in the text are what are called short notes. Remember, a short note question usually expects an answer of at least a paragraph. You are expected to write a paragraph. It could be something like justify the title. Or it could be an example, it could be an event, an incident. It could be a minor character. It could be about a particular a relationship, the student and the teacher, or the friends. It could be something like that, depending on the text that you are looking at. So, you've got short notes. Answers in brief, then you've got short notes. And the third that you have to remember when I use the word summary, I'm talking about the poems you have in your textbook. Most of our textbooks in all the semesters, if it is an anthology, do have a selection of prose passages and poems. And most often, the questions with the poems are either summarize, write a critical appreciation, what is the poet saying, etc. But generally speaking, a general question would be summarizing the poet's views. Here, remember that the question might not mention the poet's name. Well, if the question paper says summarize Wordsworth's views in the poem Daffodils, you have no problem, because the question mentions both the name of the poet and the poem. But if there is a question where the name of the poet is not mentioned, remember, you have 4, 5, maybe 8 poems at the most. You are expected to know the name of the poet too. So, when you are summarizing the views of the poet in a particular poem, what you are expected to do is not to give a line-by-line explanation. Since you are not expected to learn by memory, learn by rote the entire poem, we may not expect you to remember line by line, word by word. But certainly, we expect you to know what the poet is talking about in a particular poem. Since I began with daffodils, and since most of you would have at some stage or the other read the poem Daffodils by Wordsworth, you will have to begin by saying what he saw, where was he, how he saw them, how beautiful it was. But remember, the most important part of the poem is the conclusion, the last 4 lines, when he says, "For oft when on my couch I lie, in pensive or in vacant mood, they flash before the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude." Remember, this verse, these 4 lines summarize not only this poem, but Wordsworth's attitude to nature. And remember, when we talk of the romantic poets, we talk about their love for nature. So your summary, having described the beautiful scene by the lake, will have to conclude with this, drawing attention to Wordsworth's attitude to nature. Do you understand, my dear students, what we expect in a summary answer? Summarize the poet's views. This is what we expect. Let's look at the next kind of question. You might have fill in the blanks. Yes, most of our general English question papers do expect the student to know, to have read the text in detail. And therefore, we are now having questions which are called objective questions. Remember, my dear students, when we talk about objective questions, what we really mean is there can be only one right answer. It does not mean answer in one word. The word objective indicates that there can be only one right answer. And therefore, you will not have an objective question. You cannot call it an objective question if the question paper has a question like, my favorite color is dash. My dear students, it might be a one-word answer, but there can be as many answers as there are colors. There can be as many answers as there are people attempting to answer that question. And therefore, remember, when we use the word objective, what we really mean is that there can be only one correct answer. So what are the kinds of questions we have, my dear students? Look at the left-hand side of the slide. You can have fill in the blanks and you can have multiple choice. Of course, you can have true or false. But in all these instances, there is going to be only one right answer. Some of the universities, some of the question papers, and some of the semesters, we also have a question on vocabulary. Usually, it could be a multiple choice, or it could be match the following, or it could be fill in the blanks, where you're given a word. The word is usually from the text. You're given the word and you're expected to write the meaning. If it's a multiple choice, then you understand that there would be 4 obvious options given to you and you will have to tick the right one. You're doing it all along. You began doing it in your class 10. So you know what I'm talking about. We don't have OMR sheets, but you know what I'm talking about, where you have to tick. You probably colored it. You remember, you colored the circle in your OMR sheets. Now you have to tick it. So you tick the right answer from the 4. If you have matched the following, you know you've got an A and you've got a B. So then all the words on the A and the meanings on the B, and you will have to put the right one. My dear students, I'd advise you, in your answer sheet, don't just write A or B. to write the word. It's not going to take more than 30 seconds to write a word and to write the meaning there. What happens is if you just write A, B or whatever, the examiner has to go back to the question paper. And if A and B are not given, he will have to mentally give it an A and B. I'm not talking about the columns, remember. I'm talking about the individual words. So my dear students, when you attempt a question like that, it's not going to take much time for you to just copy. Just copy the word and the meaning from column B. If it is multiple choice, you know what to do. If it's fill in the blanks, you know what to do. So, what have we been talking about? We've been talking about the kind of questions that can be asked from your text. I've called that section, that part of the slide, textual. Can we now quickly move to the right-hand side of the slide, my dear students, and look at what we have? What do we have? We now have the grammar section. The grammar section, again, remember, is very important because in any language, unless you use the correct grammar, you could be misunderstood. What do we generally have in the grammar section over the 6 semesters that you are studying for your BA? Would be a lot of revision, a lot of things that we have already done earlier, What do I mean by that? Things that we have done in school, things that we have done in the earlier classes, in the earlier semesters. So, we've got articles, we've got prepositions. Now, I'm not going to explain to you what an article is or what the prepositions are in the English language. You've already done that. Even if you are in semester 1, you already know what that is, because a lot of it, as I'm saying again, is a repetition of what we have done at the school level. So, there could be articles. How many articles are there is a favorite question. And I have a little laugh when students say 3. Remember, there are only 2 articles. What am I saying? What's ma'am saying? Don't ask yourself that, because the 2 articles are the definite article and the indefinite article. That means the as the definite article and the indefinite article a or an. Remember, the an is dependent on the word which follows the article, whether it has a vowel sound or a consonant sound. But there are only 2 articles because a and an. No, it's a or an. So the 2 articles in the English language are the definite article the and the indefinite article a or an. So we must remember that we have to look at articles as being 2. We have to look at articles as being only 2. And then we've got prepositions. Oh, the number of prepositions in the English language, my dear students, are so many that it would be impossible for me to try and list them for you. And remember, prepositions, if you were to look at it in Hindi or Gujarati, we refer to it as karak, or even in Sanskrit. But remember that in the English language, or for that matter, any language, prepositions have a very specialized use. I'm saying that because when we try and translate a sentence from Hindi or from Gujarati into English, we might land up using the wrong preposition. For example, they were sitting at the table is English. You come to college by bus. Not in the bus, on the bus, but you come by bus. But you can't come by foot. You have to come on foot. Now, if you ask me why, I don't think I have an answer for you. There's no logic to it. But that's the way the language works. So how do we do it? The only way to do it, remember, is my proverb, practice makes perfect. The more English you read, the more sentences you practice from your grammar book or your workbook or your journals or other question papers or whatever, the more you practice, the more you will be able to use your prepositions correctly. The next point that we have, my dear friends, is auxiliary. What do I mean by auxiliary? Of course, you know, because we use different words to describe the same. Some book might call it a helping verb. Some book might call it a modal. Somebody might call it auxiliary. But you know that we're talking about words like can, do, shall, will, could, would, ought to, etc. They are helping verbs. Because I can speak English, the verb there is speak, and can is the auxiliary or the helping verb. You have to learn these, because these, when I say you must obey your elders, you can obey your elders. My dear students, both are auxiliaries, but the meaning is so different. And therefore the correct sentence, if I have to fill in the blanks, you dash obey your elders, and you have all the auxiliaries in your mind, can you say you can obey your elders? No, my dear students, all of us are expected to obey our elders. Okay, if you don't want the word obey, let me use the word respect. But you're expected to respect your elders, my dear students. So, using the right model or auxiliary is very important. Most of these questions, my dear students, are fill in the blanks. Then you've got types of sentences, interrogative, exclamatory. Most often you have to say what kind of sentence it is. Then you've got voice. Remember the active voice and the passive voice? You have to change the voice, my dear students, very often. The sentence is given in one voice and you have to change it to the other voice. Be very careful because remember, most passive sentences do not need the doer. We call him the agent in the passive voice. In the active voice, the police arrested the thief is a good active voice. But a good passive voice sentence will just say the thief was arrested. You don't need by the police. I'm not saying that by the police is wrong. But remember, most of these passive sentences would not, may not need the agent. That word, which is the doer in the active voice, becomes the agent in the passive voice and might not need it in the passive voice. Then you've got idioms, Rudi Prayog. A tough, can I say nut to crack? That itself is an idiom. It's quite tough because we have to learn the idioms. The idioms are very, very specific to a language. Idioms cannot be translated. Phrasal verbs can, my dear students, but idioms can't be translated. So idiomatic phrases or idioms. Most university syllabi are kind